Alright, so to give you a bit of practice of using the Google Maps API, I'm going to set you a challenge, and for once I'm not going to show you what it looks like beforehand. So you'll need to use your imagination a little bit. In terms of design, I'm going to keep this pretty simple. I'll just use a basic bootstrapped site, but the functionality is really simple as well. We want a box for a user to put any part of an address, so a town name or a street name and a number, and then using Ajax, we're going to do a call to the Google Maps geocoding API and return the zip code or postcode for that address. It's a pretty simple function, but one that people might find useful when you're mailing a card to a friend or something like that. So that's it. Doesn't have to look great, but feel free to go crazy on the design if you want. Best of luck. All right, here we go then. So I'm going to start with my Bootstrap 4. Just to get a very simple layout. So documentation and getting started. And then use the starter template as usual. And then let's just have a look. Here we go. So that's working great. I'm just going to put a title in, which will be Postcode Finder. There we go. All right, I'll leave Bootstrap open, but now we'll go to Google Maps Geocoding API. There we go. So that top one there, and we're going to scroll down again to the example. Here we go. So let's select all of that. And now let's put in our Ajax request. So this should be fairly familiar as we did it just in the previous video. So we use $.ajax and then we set up our parameters, so URL, and that's going to be that URL. We'll get the API key in a moment, and then type is going to be get, and success, we're going to create a function which is going to return some data, and for now we'll just log that to the console. So I'm going to go over to the console, that's console.developers.google.com, and that's where all of your keys will be stored if you need to go back to them. So we'll get to the dashboard, and this is for my latest project. So I'm then going to click Enable API Keys and Get Credentials, and then click Credentials, and there's my API key. Brilliant, so let's copy that in there. And then let's run this again and have a look at the console. We've got a warning about the Bootstrap tooltips require tether. That's fine. We're not going to be using those, but we do have our response there. Fantastic. So let's get the bits that we'll need, and we'll write code similar to what we had last time. So those are the bits that we're interested, but we don't want the country this time. We want the postal code. So we're going to have to loop through until we get exactly what we need. The reason, by the way, that we don't go straight to number 6 is that the postal code won't always be number 6, but it will always have a type of postal code. So that's why we do the looping through version. All right, so again, we use each, and we're looping through data and results, and then 0, and then address components. And then when we get there, we're looping through each of those until we get to one with a type of postal code. So we're going to get that first off by adding our function in here with, again, a key and a value. And we're going to be interested in value because value is going to be that array there. So we're going to be looking at value and then types and then 0. And we want to find out when value types 0 is equal to postal code. And for now, when that's the case, we'll just alert value long name. As far as we can tell, long name and short name are going to be the same. So I'll stick with long name. There we go. So now let's have a look. And I've got an unexpected token on line 26. What have I done? Ah, yes. I've closed the parentheses there when it should be after the curly brackets there. All right, let's try that again. There we go. So we've got our postal code. So now let's put it somewhere rather more useful than just alerting it. So let's write a little bit of HTML. We're going to start with a class of container. And we'll just add in a little bit of text here. So postcode finder, and then enter a partial address to get the postcode. And there we go. We've got our title and text there. I'm just going to, for the moment, comment out the code to get the postcode so that we can set up our form. And I'm going to do that in the usual way, going back over to Bootstrap and then finding the form component. So clicking components and then forms. And I'm just going to start off with that big template there. We definitely don't need most of that. So let's take a look. We can get rid of everything above the button all the way up to that top field set there. And then I'm going to change this to address. And we'll just have address as the label. The type is going to be text. ID is address. And we'll have the placeholder as enter partial address. And we don't need the comment about the email address there. And I'm going to get rid of the type is submit for the button because we don't want submit to actually submit the form. We're going to process that with our JavaScript. Okay, so that's looking good. We now want to change this script so that it happens when the button is clicked. So let's give this button an ID of find postcode. And then we'll uncomment the JavaScript there. And then we want to check to see whether the button with an ID of find postcode has been clicked. And when it has, we want to run a function which will be our Ajax. All right. So for now, let's just check that that's linked up correctly to our button. Wonderful. It is indeed. And then we need to change the address here from being the same every time to being whatever the user has typed into the address field. So we're going to get that from an ID of address. So that was up here. We gave it an ID of address, and then we want to get the value. And it's likely that this will have some spaces and maybe some strange characters in there. So we really want to do something to this to make it URL safe, so that when we put it into this URL, it doesn't have any spaces or things that are going to break the URL. Now, a few videos ago, we saw within PHP, you can use a function called URL encode to do that. But we can be reasonably confident that there's a jQuery equivalent, or even a JavaScript one. So let's have a look at that top result. Encode URI component. That looks pretty perfect. So let's use that in our code, and we'll encode it right there. There we go. Great. And then just before we run that, we do need to stop the form from being submitted when we press the button. And the easiest way to do that is to add an E to refer to the event that caused the click. And then we want to take E and prevent the default thing happening. We've done that a couple of times before. So that should stop the form from submitting. Okay, so let's give this a try. I'm going to put in 109 Birdwood Road, and we'll submit, and we've got not my postcode, but a zip code of some sort, which is promising. And I'm just going to add a bit more information there. So if we put Cambridge, UK in, then we do get the correct postcode. Fantastic, so everything's working well. We don't want to have this in an alert though, at least not a pop-up sort of alert. I'm going to put it in a nice pretty Bootstrap alert. Let's go back to Bootstrap, get the code for an alert. Here we go. So we'll do our usual thing. We'll put a div with an ID of message, and that's where we're going to put our response. So instead of alerting the postcode, we'll set the message div to have HTML of, then I'm using single quotes there because there are going to be double quotes inside the string. Just get rid of that line break there. And we'll have something like postcode found. The postcode is, and then we'll use value long name. There we go. Just get rid of that line break again. And I've somehow got myself an extra double quote at the end there. So I'll just get rid of that, and then let's give this a try. So we'll do our 109 Birdwood Road, Cambridge again, submit, and there we go. Oh, would help if I spelt postcode right there. But you get the idea. All right, so we're pretty close now. We've got something that works. Just make sure it works with the correct spelling as well. There we go, beautiful. One thing we don't have at the moment is if we have some invalid input. I actually managed to find a postcode for that. If we put something really long, I presume it won't be able to find a postcode for it. Yeah, there we go. It's just not updating at all. And just to prove there, in fact, if we leave the address blank, then at the moment it does nothing. So let's have another look at what is returned from the Google Maps API when an invalid address is sent. So I'm going to inspect there to have a look at the console. So we've got our object. We've also got an error message because it's trying to read an array that doesn't exist. But we should be able to stop that happening. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. We get a status of 0 results. let's just have another look at what we get with a success. There we get a status of OK. So actually I think it's probably best to check for a status of OK. And if we've got that, do the success, otherwise give them an error message. So what we'll do is we'll check for data status, and we'll initially check to see whether it's not OK. And then if it's not OK, then we'll update the message. So I'll just copy this code, and this time we'll have an alert warning, and we'll just say postcode could not be found, please try again. And if that's not the case, then we'll go through our each loop and hopefully find the postcode. All right, let's take another look then. So if I submit something empty, postcode could not be found, please try again. Whereas if I put in a normal address, we've got the postcode. Fantastic. So that's as far as I'm going to go with this. We've got elegant error handling and the website works as requested. And it's worth taking a minute to just see what we've achieved there in just a few minutes of writing code hooked into a global postcode finding system, which would have taken us years to write ourselves. And we haven't even paid anything for the privilege. So that is the power of an API. In the next video, we're going to see one more type of API that allows us to actually log in to an online platform. And we're going to do that with Twitter.